Hello and welcome to Reawakening the Sacred Self, deepening our connection with our authentic soul, where we have gathered together Indigenous elders, wisdom keepers, spiritual teachers, healers, and inspirational speakers to share their wisdom and insights as to how we can integrate our spiritual practices more deeply into our everyday lives, thus deepening our connection with our authentic soul. My name is Franses Billinghurst, your host for and the creatrix of this event, and I'm coming to you from Kaurna country here in South Australia. As such, I acknowledge the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains as being the traditional custodians of these lands upon which I reside. So, mani ngā padne, everyone. Thank you for joining me. I have the great honour to welcome Rachel Roberts as my next guest. So thank you, Rachel, for being part of this event.
Oh, thank you so much for having me a part of it. I'm truly honoured and excited.
You're more than welcome. And for anyone who's not familiar with Rachel's work, she is the best-selling author of Lupa, She-Wolf of Rome, Mother of Destiny, as well as Wolf, Embody Your Inner Wolf, and Pantheon, the Romans. But aside from being an author and also a historian, Rachel is a sacred dance teacher, an embodiment and flower essence coach. Her desire has always been to create a bridge between history and spirituality, mythology and well-being, and her work focuses on transmuting ancient mythology into embodied wisdom so that the past becomes a modern tool for healing, empowerment, and awakening for men as well as for women. Rachel is also the creatrix of Wolf Woman Rising, which is an international online wisdom school where she empowers you to embody wisdom, reclaim your wild, untamed self, and create a life lived on purpose. Rachel read history with religious studies at university and went on to complete a postgraduate qualifications in history and heritage management. She has also worked in the heritage sector for over a decade, primarily working with children and interpretation. And using her own journey and over 18 years of experience in teaching and training, Rachel empowers and inspires students to deeply understand and practice courage, trust, and authenticity, all very important skills, especially in our modern age. So I am very excited to introduce the topic of Rachel's presentation, which is reconnecting to the wild, untamed parts of ourselves for fulfillment and authentic relating. So I thought it might be a great place to sort of begin our discussions, Rachel, with you first sharing probably a little bit about your background for people who are not familiar with you, and also what drew you to creating this bridge between history and spirituality.
Okay, so I think it's always important to mention that I'm from North Wales because I think that really kind of is my foundation. I was born and bred here in North Wales. My Welsh lineage goes back, to the beginning of time. My ancestors don't seem to have moved at all. Like they were here way before, like even Homo sapiens existed. And that has really it's in my bones, it's in my blood, it's my spirit because I've been living in the mountains and the rivers and the sea, and here, even if people aren't spiritual, it's almost like it's ingrained, kind of in them. The only other place I've kind of really felt this in people is actually in India, where there's this kind of ingrained spirituality, where there is that connection with the elements, with the earth, that is just kind of, beyond. Like we have this word called hilaith. It's kind of like this, even when we're away from here, we have this longing for home and our trees and our rivers. So that's kind of my origin, like in the soil, and then growing up here. My background is kind of, it's a path of kind of reclaiming and exploring who I am. So I grew up in a Christian family, and that is still important to me. However, that wasn't enough, and it was too. It didn't kind of answer all of my questions. So I grew up experimenting, exploring for myself, like trying to find deeper meaning. And I realized, that I felt that God wasn't a single parent. I felt that, he had also had a female counterpart. And I feel like the creator has both. And that's kind of that led me to finding the goddess and working with her. And then as my past developed, I was kind of doing this alongside academia. So doing a degree in history, because I've always absolutely adored history, loved it. Um, and I was having kind of these two separate paths, kind of the history, the academic side, and then the spiritual side. And they felt very much one was kind of like doing one for society, and the expected ways of doing things. And then one was for me and my fulfillment. Um, and it came a point where I was thinking these are both two parts of me, and there needs to be a bridge, because I was finding when I was reading ancient myths, reading history, I was thinking there's a deeper message in here. This is inspiring me to be a better person. It's inspiring me mind, body, and soul. And I wanted to kind of like share all of the motivation, inspiration, kind of lessons that I was learning from history, and how, and the way it was affecting me as a person and my growth and development. Um, so, so there's another thread as well, because I was teaching belly dance from the age of 16. Um, and with that, I was reclaiming my body as well. So reclaiming has been a huge, probably my buzzword for my teenage years and my 20s, reclaiming my body and its sacredness. And then all these three things that have been whirling around separately all came together. And this is what eventually led to me becoming an author, because I wanted to share this experience where I'd had, where I was taking academic, the history, I was making it spiritual, and then trying to find tools to connect to it that weren't just reading books. I know that doesn't relate to everybody. I love doing the research, but I found I was doing that on people's behalf because they didn't want to do it. So that's where the dance and the meditation came in, were the tools that I was developing, so people get access to research that I was kind of doing, but in a more embodiment, kind of a diverse way. So that's how I kind of came to it. And then Wolf and Rising and the books all came forward just to have that access point, because I was learning so much in my head and in my body and my experience, and I was just sharing it with people. And they were going away like, you'll notice this if you're a spiritual person, that you trigger people without even trying, like, and I was getting it in dance workshops. Like I would be giving a workshop, and people go, oh, I just left my husband and I've got a new life. And I'm like, whoa. And they're like, oh, thanks for helping me. I'm like, whoa, okay. I didn't realize that was going to happen, but it would keep happening. And I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to do this on purpose. So that's how it all happened. That's kind of a very brief version of how I got here.
Oh, wonderful, Rachel. And thanks very much for that. And yes, I think a lot of us can sort of relate how sometimes, as you said, being a catalyst or almost being a trigger for somebody else on our own journey can also end up with us helping other people. But what you sort of talked about too really resonated in just your short introduction is this sort of like, yes, it's good to do all the writing and all the reading of stuff. It's the actual embodiment, it's the actual integration of this work, sort of bringing it down, what I call earthing it into the sort of physical plane, and then integrating it into our own lives, which I think is very important, especially for us to move forward and going through changes and getting a more deeper sense of purpose in our lives as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is why I kind of believe in like this difference between knowledge and wisdom, and I share more about that in my books, that, we can have all this knowledge, like you can learn books, you can go on a course, but it doesn't become wisdom until you actually do something. It's like, I call it love in action. Yeah, I love your word earthing as well, where it becomes wisdom by practice, by actually doing it.
Mm. So why don't we come back to your topic, which is all about the wild, untamed part of the self. So what do you actually mean by this? Because everybody has their own interpretations of things. And do we all have these sort of untamed selves or parts of ourselves? And even if we've sort of lived a very straight and narrow path, ticking everybody's boxes, why is it important to sort of like let the genie out of the bottle, so to speak?
So for me, the wild, untamed self is the authentic self. So this is the self that we are when we're not the judgments, the conclusions, the conditions that both we have placed upon ourselves, because we do it, as well as society and our ancestors and just, life in general. So there's all these things being told to us all the time from when we're a child. You should do this. This is your expected path. Like I said, with the kind of going the academia, that's the only kind of accepted route. That if you have 10,000 degrees, people will listen. But if you just, you're experiencing life and you're sharing, people are a little bit less kind of like believing it. So the wild, untamed self is the self that you are when you're not any of these things. So if you stripped away all of the judgments such as I'm too fat, I'm too old, I'm not academic enough, I'm not experienced enough, and then the conditions that you've placed upon yourself and society has placed upon you. So for example, that might be around kind of your dreams. So you can't do this because you're not from this country, or you're that color, or you're that gender, or the conditions like you can only be this sexual orientation, or you can whatever. um and then the conclusions are kind of I call them full stops. That's kind of when you just bring something to an end and you stop possibility and potential. So that's a saying, I am stupid, and then that's it. Or like say, oh, I really can't do this. Like for me, it's going to sound really a boring thing, but I was like, I can't do my own accounting. Like I can't, I'm crap at maths. And that was a full stop. And that stopped, limited myself, like my potential, that I can learn literally anything. You can learn literally anything. Yeah, I had decided I couldn't do that. So that's probably not a very exciting example, but that's an example where we've got a conclusion. So our wild, untamed self, I believe it's like the wolf within. So the wolf that's out in the woods. So it's away from society. It's that raw self, that unfiltered self. Um, that is always there. It's there within us. And, we have these practices, we have these tools. They vary for everybody, but they always are bringing us back to this wild, untamed self, the authentic self. Um, and I've found to kind of through my different practices, but people can approach it and find it from different ways. But that's what I think it is this, I call it the wolf, like she wolf, wolf, whatever, whichever one you relate to the most, because it's like in history and in mythology, the wolf is made to be the bad guy. It's made out to be the scary predator that's the edge of the wood, and our authentic self is made out to be that as well. We should scare it, we should be scared of it. It's kept away, it should be kept under, it should be tied down, silenced. And that's because when we are our authentic self, we're bigger, we're brighter, we make big difference, and we're fulfilled as well. And there's this is taboo almost about not being fulfilled. We should always be unsatisfied because it gives us our sob story. It gives us something to moan about. When you go meet with your friends, you're all having a really good moan about all the bad stuff that's happened that week. Well, if those bad stuff wasn't created, you'd have nothing to talk about. So it's we have to kind of we have to be very courageous, which this is the reason why I have like my three pillars of my school are trust, authenticity, and courage. They very much kind of need each other, that authentic self. Kind of I call it authentic love, of self. So you're authentically loving yourself exactly as you are, your core self, your raw self. When you're not performing, you're not wearing the mask. It takes great courage to do that, to love it, and then to share it. And then you've also got to trust that self as well, reclaiming that trust of self, to trust that self is capable. is valid, is worthy of being seen, and then trusting that you were made that way on purpose, that it's not a mistake at all, that you're not a mistake. You've got this blueprint that was, I believe, chosen by you, kind of in collaboration with the creator, before you came, that, you had this blueprint that you were going to fulfill in this lifetime. And that blueprint, is completely unique to you. It's not comparable to anything or to anybody, although we may relate to certain things. And so we have to trust that blueprint. And that trust means surrendering to experiences on our path, experiencing, trusting and surrendering the curriculum of life, all these things that are sent for us to uniquely learn. And so things might have happened along your path that you think, gosh, I wish that hadn't happened, or I'm not quite sure about this, but it was part of like your school curriculum. Like when we enter life, it's like starting school, and then you go for all of these exams and you go for all of these different classes, and then that's life, and we have to trust that that's the curriculum, that is the school that we're meant to go through.
Oh no, I know. Yeah, I'm going. Oh no, but it's like, it's in a good way. It's like I can really resonate with what you're saying, and yeah, different sort of terminology, but it's all the same. And I really like what you said about this blueprint, that it's almost like we sort of predestined our experiences, what we're going to sort of like go through in this lifetime. But coming back to your school and sort of the three pillars, which I really like, the courage, the trust, and authenticity. I'm just wondering, because in this age of social media, because you've been running your school and your well, rising your woman rising school for a while now as well. Have you seen a change, especially as social media has taken hold of a lot of people? And I'm saying this because I'm seeing, even within my own circles, being a bit of an older generation, a lot of people who I would say are very experienced are now feeling imposter syndrome, and they're feeling that they're not good enough, that they're not worthy enough, like their YouTube channels aren't flash enough, or that their TikTok videos aren't quirky enough. And so there's a lot of sort of external layering, should we say, that is sort of almost eating away at people's own authenticity. And have you noticed anything of this in the work that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I've noticed it certainly within myself, and then also with my students as well. I'm just aware of it kind of in the, in the general kind of web, so to say, that it's this more and more social media. I think it's creating more and more comparison. So you're holding yourself up, and then you're comparing yourself all the time, so you're kind of forgetting your own uniqueness. And it's this, you think like in the past, in the very far past, we were in a pack, so like a wolf, you'd only have a few people that were there, like, supposed to validate you. Now there's a million people that you want to validate you. So you're wanting the approval of every single person that, that is coming into your space. And especially if you're a leader, that can be hundreds of thousands of people, and we're always being seen all the time. So we've also lost this privacy, that we would have had, where, sometimes you think, gosh, even when you're picking your nose, there must be somebody somewhere's watching it. It's always on TV. There is no privacy to just be ourselves, but always feeling this comparison. Um, one of the tools I found as a leader, especially, is having very firm boundaries around this. So I try to, when I'm on social media, it's purely for work, and I treat it as a workspace. So I have to have time limits, and if I find that I'm starting to browse, that's my time to put the phone down, go for a walk. And on that walk, I will touch the earth again. I will take the wind in, and I remember that I'm in a body, not in my mind. Um, And I think authenticity can be more of a challenge, when we are seeing all these different things, all these different options, I suppose. It's like going into a giant buffet and being in hundreds of thousands of different things. You think, oh, that looks good, or that sounds good, and oh, that person's doing that. Maybe I should do that. It can be useful in that each person that we meet does hold up a mirror to ourselves, and it's important to remember that. So every time, um, especially like, if we're judging, for example, where you're judging somebody that we see online, that is always just a mirror. So the way that you're looking into your phone, it's as if you've kind of got that, personal view on. You're just looking at yourself, and you need to remember that. So if something triggers you, or you're judging something, you're criticizing something, that's because there's something of that within you. And it's remembering that, that, and remembering that. And I think that can lead us to kindness, more kindness. I think we have a responsibility to be kind online. And because everybody is just trying to find a way to be, and we're all being faced by this overwhelming pressure of how to act, how to be, who are we, what do I contribute, and this overwhelming, like I said, comparison to everything. So try to just be kind. Like, kindness seems to have just slipped away. Like, people feel that they have permission to forget it when they're online. And I see so many times that people kind of go on these witch hunts, and ironically, recently, there's been a lot of witches hunting the witches, which just kind of makes me laugh. But, and I just think, just some kindness, and just, you don't know everything. You're not seeing everything. That screen, that square is all you're seeing. You're not seeing everything that's outside of that. And that includes yourself in that. When you're looking at yourself in the social media, you're seeing just a square. So just remember that there's a whole kind of outside to it. And, there will be an element of your authentic self that's going to be in this tiny little screen. That's going to be the light that's shining through. But your authentic self is also all of this, that's all the way around this tiny, weeny little screen. Yeah, so for me, it's boundaries has been the biggest tool that I've had to, for that I invoke Father Wolf. So the Father Wolf that kind of, wolves in the wild will go around, and they'll go out and check the boundaries, and they'll do this frequently, almost every single day. They'll check those boundaries, and we need to do the same every day, every time we go on social media. Where is the appropriate boundary that needs to be here now? Sometimes it can be wider, sometimes it can be smaller, so like today, my boundaries are a little bit wider because I'm connecting with you, and I know this is a space I can trust, where I'm supported and I'm seen and I'm held. But that might not be the same case when I go on Facebook. So my boundaries are a little bit, closer to myself, and I'm aware of that. I even physically will visualize that, I'm not going to share my visualizations that I'm doing right now because private, then mine. But whatever you use, just visualizing it literally around yourself. And I think we need to do this grounding, centering, and protection more so now that we have social media. Because I do love it. It is a fantastic tool. It's a way to connect, but we just need to be just aware of the vices as well as the pros.
Yes, yes, it's very much a double-edged sword. And I'm noticing a theme, and because the wolf obviously is very strong, it's very strong theme throughout the work that you do. You've written about 3 books that all have sort of wolfy sort of themes through them. So when did this connection with the wolf begin? And I know you've sort of mentioned some of the purposes or how you use or utilize the wolf energy, but how did it really inspire you to truly sort of bring it into your work? And also, as we've been listening to you, you're reminding us of this animal and what it actually does. You said like the male wolf or the father wolf goes out and checks the boundaries, and how we can actually utilize these important skills. So how did you come about putting all this together? It sounds really fascinating.
So Wolf came forward for me. She was always kind of like lingering, and I say she because for me, myself, I relate to the she wolf, although I move through and I can embody any of the genders, etc. Of course, but I'll go more into that. So the she-wolf for me, came forward. I didn't know who she was at first, but she came through my teenage years. Um, and she really came forward for me around reclaiming my sexuality and my sensuality. So that was the place where I felt most challenged and closed down. Around kind of my teens and my 20s, or early 20s, I was attracting a lot of predatory male energy. For some reason it just kept coming into, so obviously I said part of my curriculum kept coming into my energy. And also there was this kind of challenge that I felt in my teens that was around like the worth of my body. Like it was very much everybody else's to judge, to criticize, to observe, but I didn't feel like it was mine because of that. Like it was something that was on a pedestal for everybody to see all the time. And I was really struggling to own my body. Um, and when I started to explore how I could own my body, this is through the belly dancing, and I found a way to enjoy my body. For me, that was nobody else's business. And then, that developing into kind of like exploring kind of like what it meant to be a woman, to have, to be in a female body and to experience life as that. The she-wolf came forward, and I later found out, that it was Lupa that had been there all along, but this white she-wolf that kind of, you know, was being that ferocity forward, because I'd always been told, to be a good girl, to be quiet, to be well behaved, to not speak out, and I felt very much like, this happened. I know we briefly talked about it before, but my sexual assault, like I felt like I couldn't say anything because I wasn't allowed to, because men could just do what they want because my body was theirs, and he had more of a right to it than I did, and I didn't feel like I could say anything. And the she-wolf was about kind of reclaiming my voice in particular, so working on the throat chakra, that I could speak out, that if anybody kind of, I could tell them to F off, clear boundaries against speaking them. She was like, if anybody said, you're stupid, you're too fat, the she-wolf doesn't stand for that. She didn't stand for that within me. And so that's how I kind of came to know her. And then she came back, and introduced herself as Lupa kind of later on. And that's how I ended up writing a story about Lupa, because she came to me during another pivot time, a time that was a time where I was deep in her cave of going into a dark night of the soul. That's kind of when she would turn up, this dark night of the soul. And I realized kind of like, when I met her at this time where I started to think about writing the book, I realized, gosh, all these times that I've been in this dark night of the soul, I've just been in her cave. She's taken me there. She's holding me. She's letting me have this time to process, to be raw, to be authentic, and actually say, what do I want? Why has this happened to me? What is it trying to tell me? Why have I chosen this? And then, I'd have that time with her and come back out stronger, more aligned, discerning, my voice more empowered. And then I found like, the next step to that was I realized that, the feminine had been empowered, and, I sorted out, well, not all of it, but there's always more layers, but a lot of the stuff that was in all the messy stuff in there, I kind of unraveled that. And then as that unraveled, I began to notice, because that was unraveled and that was smooth, I began to notice how messy the masculine was within me. Um, and I was like, oh gosh, right, okay, there's more to do. Of course, there's always more to do. And I had this experience in Glastonbury, where I was with Pan actually. I know him as Faunus now, with the Roman name, but where I kind of I was shown a mirror in him, in his archetype, his energy, that there was a huge amount of healing that needed in the masculine as well. So the last kind of like, what would I call it, like 6, 7, 8 years, I've been trying to embody and explore the masculine kind of archetypes and been working through them. So father wolf, grandfather wolf, what I call bachelor wolf, which is the young the young male. So exploring them all to myself, and they've all been quite new to me because I've always been very very feminine, very much in my female, but we embody all of the archetypes. And I think it's really important to know that we contain all of them within us. So it's not like, I'm a woman, so therefore I'm just a she wolf. No, I have father wolf within me. I have grandfather wolf within me, and I can embody them. I can explore them anytime because they're just aspects of me. It's not fixed, like, just male and the female. That is kind of part of the creator, but then it kind of comes out in lots of different different strands, and they're all woven within us, and we might relate to uh more one than the other, and that might change. It's always, we have to have allowance for that. So, and I'm still working through that kind of that masculine, although I found that I've come back to the feminine recently as well. I've come back to grandmother wolf now. It's just going from one to the other, what I need at the time and what comes up. So I'm working through guilt at the moment, and that is very much, it's being triggered by grandmother wolf. She's here with me. It's that archetype I'm needing to embody to work with that in particular. So yeah, it's all kind of, I forgot what the question was now. I feel like I've gone off on a tangent, but I hope it answered what the question was.
It's fantastic, Rachel. Just listening to you talk, and especially we're living in a world that seems to like to pigeonhole and divide everything. But you've reminded us, and this is something that Carl Jung talked about, and I love the symbol of the yin yang, where we have these different aspects all within us. We might be one gender more than the other, but we have all genders within us, and this makes up the whole us, the whole individual of who we are. And I just thought, because you've mentioned Lupa, for people who do not know who she is, I know she one of your first books, can you just explain, people who haven't heard about her before or her name, and then maybe some of the other deities that you work with in particular and how you relate with them?
Yeah, of course. So Lupa is the she-wolf of Rome. So I think a lot of people know her, even if they don't realize they know her. So, if you even look at like Rome's football club, she's their logo, and you'll see her all over Rome. So she's a pivotal character in the foundation story of Rome. So that's her main epiphany, I suppose it is recorded. So there she finds Romulus and Remus when they have been put on the river to die by their great uncle. She rescues them, she nurtures them, she feeds them, and then she takes them to her cave. And again, she nurtures them. She holds them in this space until they go on to their next step. They eventually kind of leave her and become the founders of Rome. Um, so she's a really pivotal figure in that. She is the I suppose you might call her the dark goddess perhaps, but she is that kind of that energy that takes us down into the underworld, the symbolic cave. And she initiates us there. She initiates us there by kind of being this womb tomb that holds that space. So she was vitally important to ancient Rome. She was believed to not just protect Romulus and Remus, but them as the original Romans, were symbolic of all Romans. She protected the city. She protected all Romans wherever they were in the empire. So, that protection spread, all the way from Scotland to the Jordan. She was holding space for this whole empire. She was a mother of them all. And, her cave became a sacred space on Palatine Hill. The temple is still there, though it's not really accessible, but there's a shrine. It was connected to the celebrations of Lupercalia, a festival in February, which remembered Romulus and Remus and their connection to the wolf, and then their establishment, um, of Rome. So I call her the mother of destiny because I felt seeing their experience and my experience at this time within the cave with her, any time that you spend with her, is um, bringing you more attuned to kind of what is your blueprint. So she helps you to find out, what are all the elements that are in your blueprint? What does this overall blueprint mean? So kind of what are you here to do? Who are you here to be? She helps to reveal that. So that time when you're going, into the cave, it helps to bring some clarity there in the darkness. You're able to see nothing but feel yourself. Your senses are turned inwards in that darkness with her, and her warm body will hold you. So when I found her at the time where I'd been made redundant in what I thought was my absolute dream job, and I was certain this is what I was meant to do, I was made redundant, and then I found myself feeling relieved that I'd been made redundant. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I thought this is what I was meant to do, and now I'm actually happy that it's gone. So I was really questioning myself and where am I going? And she came to me at that point and said, bigger, more. Like, you've been keeping yourself so small, you've been doing, again, what you think you should be doing. You've been going down the normal path of, what's expected. And the thing is, I say what would be normal for me, because some people, that job would be perfect, is what they're meant to fulfill, what they're meant to do. It was just not right for me. That doesn't mean that normal jobs, some people are meant to be the cooks in restaurants. Of course, that's how they are offering their unique thing. But for me, it was about being a leader and a teacher. That's my particular blueprint, is to take that knowledge and transform it, alchemize it into wisdom to share it. I'm like a watering spout, that's my blueprint, and I can do that in lots of different ways. I was doing it in my job. I was doing it, by teaching children about history. I did it in my belly dancing by teaching those moves, and they were all kind of like, like a little bit of essence of that blueprint, but they weren't kind of like the way that I could fulfill that blueprint in a way that fulfilled me, mind, body, and soul. There was a little bit more, a little bit kind of more of a way of doing it. So she showed me that, she was like, write a book. And I felt like she was the one that I should write a book about, because she was the one that kind of helped me to, remind me of my love of writing, and showed me that was the way for me to be bigger, to be brighter, I suppose. Um, so yeah, so she is kind of like, she's a deity that's been there with me, probably through my darkest points, my deepest points. But I have a mix. I call kind of like my deities like my council. I imagine it kind of like the Arthur's round table, that they're all kind of sat round the table, and they all kind of contribute, kind of like, if a certain situation comes up, I kind of always imagine them kind of like kind of like the war council, I suppose. Like, oh gosh, Rachel's done that. Okay, I'll sort that. I'll go and deal with her now. And you can go next time, or they'll come for a particular reason, but they're kind of all there, and I have particular ones that are around that table. The majority have ended up kind of being Roman, hence why I specialize in sharing about Roman deities, because they're the ones that seem to have turned up for me. Which is kind of ironic. There's a lesson in that for me, because I've always kind of disliked the ancient Romans and the ancient Roman world, because there's some things like, gladiatorial fighting and stuff I don't agree with, resonate with. And it's been a challenge thinking, oh, okay, right, I'm supposed to work on behalf of these ancient Roman deities, and it's a bit of a, feels like a clash. But it's finding that higher wisdom, that's meant to come forward, a way of connecting to them now that perhaps respects what was before, the ancient Romans, the way they connected to them, the way they celebrated them, but bringing them into a modern way of connecting to them. So, I have Mars there. He's one of my primary deities, Mars Pater, Mars the Father, the god of agriculture and farming and fatherhood and protection in the ancient Roman times. Minerva's also there for me. So, wisdom and knowledge, and bringing that forth in a way that is healing. And Apollo's there, I dance and I sing with Apollo. He's kind of like the one that helps me to access my joy, and what brings me pleasure. So there's quite a few. I won't go into all of them, but that's kind of like, some of my primary deities.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for sharing. And you sort of like reminded me with your story about Lupa. And yes, just you said that there's a connection with her, I suppose, a dark goddess or one of these sort of creatrix goddesses, which are often sort of like pushed away, especially when they are the foundational figures. And as you mentioned, Lupa is one of the, or is the foundational mother of Rome. And I think sometimes we forget about that as well. And I do love that analogy about the cave. And sometimes, especially in our modern world, we need to sort of take time out, shall we say, retract back into a cave just to breathe and recenter ourselves. There's so much happening in the world around us. Right. And you did mention too at the beginning that you are from North Wales. So I'm just assuming that nature plays a, a role in sort of your empowerment and your healing, or am I completely clutching at straws here?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. I mean, I can't speak for all people from North Wales, but this, I feel that because we are kind of between, our heritage, of like the old tales, like the Mabinogi, and these deities that we have here, are very elemental. They connect us to the elements, So even like, if you go up to Merlin's castle here, um, it's wild. You're looking out over mountains, excuse me, and down to the ocean, and it this wild aspect. And I, it's funny looking back, in historical records, and the Welsh are always described as very wild, very untamed. In fact, that and it gets like the period where they're trying to kind of like stop people from being taught to speak Welsh. It's kind of like trying to civilize the Welsh. Um, um, so I think, I mean, personally for me, I've always felt that wildness, that connection to nature in me, and I don't know whether I would have. I can't say, but it feels very part of my Welshness. I don't know whether I would have had that experience if I'd been born elsewhere, but maybe I would have. But um, for me, like there's so many access points here to nature. I'm literally in nature. You can't ignore it, because, the mountain is like right next to you. It's so apparent, it's, I suppose it's like the equivalent of being in the city. You can't ignore all of these, cement blocks that are around you, these towers that are reaching up, and that's going to give you different lessons, about aspiration, different kind of like ways of thinking, reflecting. So I think just being in the land here has formed the way that I am, um, because I do find it in, like my family, especially, they don't follow the same spiritual path as me, but they have that innate connection to nature, to the earth. And then, for me, that has, I've always just wanted, I've always danced in nature. That's the way I've always connected. I've been connected to the flowers and the trees. Um, and then that later on in my practice, I trained as a flower essence coach. And that's kind of the way that I brought it into a format, a system where I could actually use that to support others. I mean, first I used it to support myself, but then um, it became a system rather than just an experimental experience. Um, and the way that flower essences work, we kind of have I feel like we have flowers that particularly connect to us, to kind of like our animal guides, where you have probably one or two that, are like the ones you felt born with, that are like your particular animals. Feel we have the same with flowers. Um, you have like one or two or three perhaps that are really like your flowers that you're meant to work with through this lifetime. And then kind of almost like the deities, animal guides, you'll have other ones that will come in that will be there to help with particular particular things, particular ailments of the mind, body, or soul. Just like you would have a particular herb for, um, feeling a particular thing inside your body, like stomach ache, you want your peppermint or your ginger or something. The same with the flower essences, that there's a particular emotional thing going or soul thing going on the flower essence. There'll be one in particular that will match that and that will come to help you. Um, So
Mm.
my kind of primary flower essences that I've worked like are my kind of essences are marigold, borage, and daisy. You know, fleabane if you want to be really specific, because I know daisy is quite a broad family, but um, they're the three that for me have been like are like part of my blueprint, I suppose. If the blueprint's a house, they are the garden, you know, that's along the bottom of the blueprint. And then there are many others that I've explored and worked through, you know, and with, like I say, my current theme at the moment is guilt that I'm working through. White hyssop is the ally for exploring that, processing that, and moving that through you. So, um, and it feels like an essential way for me to work. I think that, you know, as a human being, we're constantly engaging with nature, even when we don't realize, even just like eating food, you know, hopefully the majority of that should be natural. That's getting less and less, isn't it? So you're constantly, every single meal you have, you're engaging with plants. You know, you're consuming them. You're consuming their energy, their healing properties, their color, their blueprint, their reason for being. That's coming physically into your body. You're transmuting it, transforming, alchemizing it, you know, in your body. So I think, you know, a lot of people say, oh, I don't really connect with plants, so I don't connect with nature. 3 times a day you are communing with nature in your meals, you know, so that can be a basic start point. And then every time you walk, even if you're walking on cement 1/2 meter down, there's soil. You're walking on her, you're breathing the air. um you know, so I personally think it's integral in all of us that we are natural beings, that we do connect to nature. Again, I've gone off on a tangent, so I'll stop there. I could just talk about it for hours.
Yeah, it's wonderful. It's a good reminder too, especially in our busy modern world where we sort of forget just how interconnected we are, and we're not actually separate from nature. We can never be separate from nature, and we are part of nature. But unfortunately, Rachel, we are running out of time. But I want to mention, because you do have a gift for our audience. It's called Integration, and it is a guided meditation and journey. But can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, of course. So, integration is kind of it's a portal that I have created, an experience where actually you're connecting with Egyptian goddesses. So Egyptian goddesses I've connected through my belly dance experience of being a belly dance teacher for over 18 years. And they've helped me to connect with my physical body. So like I said, like, you know, each deity and each plant kind of has a something they're contributing, there's something particular they're guiding to you. I find, you know, for me personally, the Egyptian deities help me connect to my physical body. So it's working with Isis and Nephthys. And so they're going to take you on this alchemical journey where you're going to experience working with them, receiving their wisdom and their healing, and what they particularly have to share. So I feel like they're above and below. They're like Ishtar and Ariska Girl. They're kind of like this kind of polar that can bring you into full integration. So these two parts that are separate, bringing them together, whatever those two parts are for you, outside, inside, above, below, who I should be, who I am, who I can be, the before, the after, they are going to help you to integrate, to bring it all together, whatever that means for you, because it'll be unique and different for everybody. So whatever you need, they will help to facilitate that.
Sounds wonderful. And I also want to mention your website. So that's wolfwomanrising.com. And do you have any events or things happening towards the end of the year or next year? Or would it be best if people just go onto your website? Do you have a newsletter, or what's happening on your website?
Yeah, so I'm currently trying to finish writing book 4, which is all about the goddess Flora, the goddess of Roman goddess of flowers and sex and sensuality. So there's no events at the moment. That'll change in the autumn. But yeah, if you kind of find out about that on my website, you know, that's got the pre-orders for the Roman Pantheon book as well, and the other 2 books are on there ready and available to read. And then, you know, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. I do a lot on YouTube, free videos, meditations. But I think the nicest way to connect is, yeah, through my newsletter, because it's not on social media, and that is a boundary. So you don't have to go onto Facebook to find out what's going on. All the links are there, and I can talk to you free of Elon Musk, etc.
Wonderful. And of course, I can find all the links to wolfwomanrising.com below this recording. So, Rachel, it's been absolutely a delight speaking with you today. Thank you very much for sharing your wisdom with us.
Oh, thank you for having me here. It's been wonderful as always.
You're more than welcome. And for everyone else who's watching this, I hope you have enjoyed our discussion with Rachel as much as I have. And Natalia, thank you. I look forward to seeing you again soon. Blessings.